Hello again. My name is Andrea Provaglio. Good to see you here. Thank you for showing up. And it's my first time at this conference, AgileByExample. I was speaking at many conferences, but first time at this one. And so far, so good. I mean, I love the atmosphere. How do you guys like it? Is it a good conference? Yeah, I think so. So kudos to the organizers. So leading. Okay, so why do I want to talk about leading? Not necessarily leadership. I want to talk about the act of leading. And the reason why I want to talk about it is because while I work independently, I work with companies that want to improve in what they do. And as Mark Leffer was reminding here 1 hour ago, of course in the Agile Manifesto we say that processes and tools are important, but individuals and interactions are even more important. And from there, you can also take it to the next level, which means that individuals and interactions create some kind of neural system in the organization. They are the basis, the foundation of the company culture. And everything that happens inside of that culture is largely dependent on the culture itself. Like Deming used to say, 90% of the behavior of a person in a company depends on the system. It does not depend on the person per se. And you can see that just for yourself. I mean, when you are at home, which is a different system from when you are at work, you behave differently, right? In a certain sense, you're a different person. And so I look at these things a lot when I go into organizations. And so what I want to share with you today is something about leadership or leading in an agile environment, in a specific agile culture, which can be different from leadership in other circumstances. So the gentleman that you barely see up there is Mr. Taylor, the father of the scientific management, right? And let me start with some background. You may have noticed that things have changed a little in the last 500 years. I don't know if you noticed. They did. Okay. So, for instance, 500 years ago, the economy was mainly based either on agriculture or craftsmanship. Right? Most people were craftsmen, which means that the people who were able to do the job were also the people who knew how to do the job. The doers and the thinkers were in the same person. And then during the Industrial Revolution, something changed, because we needed to learn to master complicated processes like factories. And not many people at that time had the education to be able to manage such a complicated process, which means that we started to separate thinkers, people who understood the process, from doers, workforce. And we started calling the thinkers managers and the doers resources, right? And today we also call them FTE sometimes, which I think is a completely meaningless term for information technology. Because what we do today is we live in a... I'm sorry, you don't really see up there. Anyway, we live in what we can call a creative economy, or intellectual economy, a knowledge economy, blah, 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 blah. Basically what I'm trying to say is that in our days, the thinker and the doer are back together, because everybody in this room is a very well-educated people. Every person in this room has at least 12, 15 years of education. So the people who know how to do the job and the people who do the job are back together, right? One thing changed, however, and the thing that changed was the world. There are new things like the internet, global markets. So your competitor, if you lived in Warsaw 500 years ago and you were making shoes, probably your competitor was a guy 2 blocks from where you lived. Okay. But now your competitor could be, especially in our industry, you can be putting out a software product and your competitor could be a small startup in Taiwan. Okay? So the market is global, it's completely different. So there is a lot of need to be able to be creative, to be competitive, to innovate, because the market has changed. So the other thing I want to mention before I start talking about leading and leadership is, do you guys recognize this lady, Grace Hopper? She was a computer scientist, and she was also a US Navy officer. And she said many beautiful things about computer science and people. She was the one, by the way, who invented the term debugging, because she physically removed a bug from a Mark I computer, the insect. Okay. So, I mean, she's been there for quite some time, and she was definitely a pioneer in our field. And one of the many beautiful things that she said was this one. She said that you manage things and you lead people. Okay. And this comes from a woman that was a US Navy officer, right? And that was probably 30 or 40 years ago. She died, I think, in 95, so the quote is at least 20 years old, okay? Probably much older. And she also went on to say that we went overboard with management and we forgot about leadership. Now, why is that? You know, the question is, how come that we did forget about leadership? And one possibility, of course, is that we are still using mental models and management practices that come from the Industrial Revolution. In the Industrial Revolution, you didn't need to lead people, right? You just needed to tell people what to do. Because the thinkers were one thing and the doers were another thing. Okay? So this could be one of the reasons why we forgot about leadership. But leadership is extremely important in what we do because we don't want to tell people what to do. We want to leverage their knowledge. We want to leverage their passion, as Mark was saying here. We want to leverage their collective intelligence as a group. So, and we need that because we live in a completely different world with a completely different economy, different technologies, and so on and so on and so on. So we need to do some update. Now, as I mentioned, I want to talk about leadership not in general terms or in very widespread terms as the beautiful keynote that we had this morning, but I want to talk about leadership in the specific context of Agile. So in Agile, we say that we strive to have self-organizing teams or self-managing teams. Is that right? Do you try? Yeah? Do you try at least? Yeah, do you succeed? Sometimes. Sometimes. Okay, good, good, good. So why do we want self-organization? Why do you want self-organization? That's a question for you. I'm sorry? Experts know what to do. Okay? And I would like to add, but don't let them work alone. Okay? They know what to do, and don't let them work alone. Never, ever, ever. Another option, another reason why we want self-organization. Okay, so leverage passion and the commitment, autonomy, and collective intelligence. Yep. There are other reasons sometimes, like we want the teams to be more resilient, which means that we don't want to have a single point of failure, which is what we have when we have a silos. When one person is the one who knows everything, if that person is away, you are dead. Okay? So we want resilience. So there are many good reasons why we want to have self-organization. But the question is leadership and self-organization together a paradox? In other ways, how can you organize something that is supposed to self-organize? Right? How can you organize something, especially if you're a leader, that it's supposed to self-organize? And that's why leadership in Agile, in a self-organizing environment, is kind of an interesting paradox. And I'm not saying that it's impossible, I'm just saying that it takes a different perspective from the usual management practices that we have been used to in the last 50 or 80 or 100 years. So this is AgileByExample, right? And so I wanted to give you something practical. For this talk, I decided to select actually a small slice of a workshop which I have on leadership and self-organization. It's a one-day workshop, and I selected only a small portion of it. It's a one exercise that we do with the attendees. And so we're not going to do the exercise because, of course, we don't have the time and it's a lot of people. But I want to share some of the results with you from this exercise. So the exercise usually starts with thinking about what's the difference between management and leadership. So what would you say? What is the difference between management? One thing that you think is different from a manager and a leader. Just one. characteristics or behaviors or positions, whatever. What is different? A leader participates. Okay, thank you. Anything else? I'm sorry? Oh, okay, a leader has followers. Something like that, right? Okay, good. So I don't have much time, but I can present you what some people thought about leadership. Then again, this comes from a group of people. It's a practical exercise. So you may agree or not agree with what I'm going to present because it's a subjective perspective, but maybe you can find something useful in it. So you see, you can see that a leader is appointed. Usually the leader is emergent or is, however, selected by the people. Management could be about results, and leadership could be about making things smooth and remove obstacles. The leadership is about providing resources, and so you see these kind of things. If we go back to the definition by Grace Hopper, right, that you manage things and you lead people. So if you think about it, managing things could be you need to manage time, you need to manage budget, you need to manage bills, you need to manage working spaces, you need to manage things. Okay? When it comes to leadership, it's a different story. It becomes more people-related. So part of the exercise that I do with my students is, with attendees, is this one. I ask them to write down a list of things that may happen to them at work. Something from very trivial, very common, to something very exceptional. Okay? And you can see something very exceptional down here, like alien invasion. We're talking about real starships landing in the office and shooting, and with aliens shooting people, to something very trivial, like, oh, we missed a deadline. Never happened, right? Okay. So we missed a deadline and stuff like that. So I ask people to write down this list. And then I suggest that they place these things, these items, along these four corners. Thank you for removing the Okay, so in this corner, down on your right, what? You have, there's an answer that we can all see and agree on. So it's something very obvious. Up there, we need an expert because it's very complicated. And then on the other corner, there is no right solution for this. We might need to try different things because we don't really know. And then down here, you have, it's just impossible to see what to do. And then the next step is I ask people to place these stickies, to place these items on the quadrant, and this is what they did. Then again, you don't necessarily need to agree. That was their perspective. Okay, you might have a different perspective. But you see, someone says that, okay, well, when someone quits, we have a very straightforward process to let this person go outside of the company, to leave the company, okay? When we have a critical bug, that might require the intervention of an expert because we need a fast solution to a very complicated subject. Okay. Up there, you have things like people showing up late that Mariusz, I think, talked about here previously, or I don't remember the name. Yeah, Mariusz. Yeah, okay. Missed deadline, risk mitigation. These are not so simple. And then you have, of course, alien invasion, which is just impossible to see what to do because we have no idea. Never happened. So we'll see. Now, some of you might have seen where I'm heading to, right? This is just a way to help people understand what Cynefin is about. Okay? And I don't want to discuss Cynefin, the Cynefin framework at this point, because it's way too profound to be explained in 2 minutes. And definitely it's not a categorization framework. It's not like we have 4 quadrants. There's much more to Cynefin in terms of the science behind it and the practical applications on top of it. So anyways, this is the Cynefin framework. In the Cynefin framework, oh, how many of you guys are already familiar with Cynefin? Good, so I can save a lot of time, thank you. But for the rest of you, in Cynefin, we try to, Dave Snowden tried to define different domains in which a system can find itself. And there are 2 great families of domains, which are ordered and unordered. you can also think like mechanical system and organic systems. Okay, so on your right-hand side, we have what we call ordered system. In an ordered system, you have a direct cause-effect relationship. If the relationship is immediately visible, it's obvious. If the relationship is not so visible and we need an expert, it's complicated. Like if you have a very simple system like a bell that you can ring, something like that. It's a very simple system. And a jet fighter is a much more complicated system. It's still deterministic. Everything in a jet fighter is deterministic. It's just very complicated. Okay? But on this side, you have systems that are in a certain way unpredictable. Or let's put it another way. A complex system that you find up on your left, a complex system is a system in which there are relationships of cause and effect, but these relationships interfere with each other all the time. And one of the characteristics of a complex system is that in any given moment, you can reconstruct the cause of events that led to the current situation, but what you learn from doing this kind of analysis in the past, what you learn will not give you any guarantee that you can have a predictable direction in the future. Like poverty in the third world, okay? We can reconstruct the causes that led to the current situation, but there is no guarantee that if we do this, we get that. There is no guarantee, because it's a complex system. Okay, so now you know what complexity is about. you don't, but it was just an introduction. Now, in terms of leadership and management, I have a question for you. Where would you place management? Chaotic. Okay, I understand that you may perceive, you can have an emotional response to management as a chaotic, but as a discipline, where would you place it? Obvious or complicated, right? If it is obvious, probably you don't need a manager, but if it is complicated, you do. If you need to manage a very complex iron factory, steel factory, as Winston Taylor used to do, then you need experts. Okay, where would you place leadership? Complex or and? Well, in my opinion, everywhere. I know it's a trick, but yeah, in my opinion, everywhere. Because leadership is something that you, or I can use the words of Stephen Perry, and he says, leadership is an activity, it's not a position. Leadership is something that you do all the time, is an activity, is not a position in the company. You're not appointed as a leader of something, okay? So let me go back to the exercise that I do with my attendees. So remember the quadrant, this is what we had. Now the other step in the exercise is I ask them to try to remember different leaders or forms of leadership that they have encountered in their professional life. And I ask them to create some kind of archetype for that. So a type of leadership could be the hero, the guy that when there's a problem, the guy he comes in and he saves the day all by himself. Hero. And have you ever met heroes in your professional life? People who save the day, but just by themselves? Yeah. Okay, you do. Good. Charismatic leaders or wise. The wise could be Gandalf, like in the Lord of the Rings. He shows up when it's needed, and he has very profound knowledge and wisdom, and he knows stuff that you don't. And usually he disappears for ages, and then he comes back. Okay. Ever met any Gandalf in your company? Okay, okay. And other things, what we have, a role model, laissez-faire in French, which means just let it go, I don't care, do whatever you want. Okay? Okay, this kind of leadership. Have you met any leader? Okay, good. Expert, the mother, the caring mother. Oh, I will take care of you, don't worry, it'll be fine. Okay. Ever met mothers? Yeah, okay, good. So the other exercise I ask them to do, the next step is where would you place the leadership styles in relation to the kind of problems that you need to face. Where would you place the pink over the yellow? Which incidentally is also the same color in the conference. Anyway, that's just by coincidence. Okay. So where would you place that? And this is what these guys told me. They said, yeah, we would do something like this. Then again, you don't need to agree necessarily, but that's what they thought. Okay? And to some extent, it makes sense to me. Like, for instance, they placed a dictator in chaos, which makes sense. If you think about it, chaos means that there is no kind of constraint. There is no rule. Everything is totally chaotic, no cause and effect. And in chaos, the best thing that you can do is to try to get out of chaos as soon as possible. You need to make fast decisions that don't necessarily are the right ones. They don't have to be the right ones, but they are decisions that bring some order to the chaos because it becomes more manageable. Okay? And dictatorship is the fastest way to make decisions. So you do what I say, period. Okay? I might be right, I might be wrong, but you do what I say, period. Very fast. Okay? For other things, they said, oh, laissez-faire. Okay? Laissez-faire. For obvious situations, I don't need to tell you what to do. It's so obvious, right? Just, okay? Just do whatever you think it's needed, okay? And so on and so on. So what I'm trying to say is that there is not, if you're interested in self-organization, so if you're interested in letting people develop, probably you don't want to be a dictator all the time. Probably you don't want to be a laissez-faire leader all the time, okay? You need to tune your leadership style to the specific context in which you find yourself, in which the system finds itself at that specific time. Okay? So leadership is contextual. Leadership is contextual. This is what I'm suggesting. And of course, you don't want to develop any kind of attachment to any of these leadership styles, because if you become attached to being a dictator or to be the expert or the wise or the mother, if you become attached to that style, then it's harder for you to move to a different style when it's needed. Okay? So what I'm talking about is leadership should be egoless. Effective leadership should be egoless. Okay? No ego. As far as we can. Yeah, of course, it's not a simple thing to do. But another thing I would like to add about, we have 6 minutes, right? 5 minutes, okay. About 7 minutes, ooh, big budget. Another thing I'd like to mention about, about systems is that in our field, we hear a lot about system thinking or complexity thinking, and we hear a lot of people saying, yes, you can tune the system, you can adjust the boundaries, the relationships, the constraints, the attractors, blah, blah, blah. You do things with the system. Okay, well, one thing I would like to suggest or to remind you is that you are part of the system that you are trying to manipulate. You influence the system and you are influenced by the system because you are part of it. So when you're trying to develop or you're trying to find your leadership style, the leadership style that works in that specific domain, it's important to be able to develop some kind of, how can I put this, a schizophrenic approach. No, I'm kidding, of course. But it's important to be able to see the system from the inside because you are part of it, and from the outside at the same time. I know it is kind of vague and esoteric, but I'm sure that some people understand what I'm talking about. Okay. You cannot observe a system and play with the system if you're not part of the system. So if you're part of the system, you need to be able to perceive it from where you are and from the outside at the same point, because you need both perspectives to understand where you are and therefore decide what to do in terms of leadership. So, yep, system awareness is one thing that can help you. Being aware of what the system is, what's happening in the system, in which domain the system is at the moment. A client of mine wrote me an email this morning. They had a huge crisis yesterday. People shouting in the office because, no, this is a self-organizing team and we must decide what, blah, blah, blah. Crisis, okay? So what do you do in a crisis? I don't know. But it's important to know that a crisis, which is something complex or chaotic, is different from something complicated. It's important to be able to make this distinction and therefore to adjust your leadership style accordingly. So system awareness, self-awareness. I don't remember the name of the last speaker here. He was talking about self-awareness, right? Yeah, some people were here in the room, I remember, and I was thinking, yeah, so being aware of what's going on inside of you and not only outside of you. Other things that can help you in terms of leadership is slightly, it's not directly related to the Cynefin approach that I presented, but I'm starting to find it more and more relevant in terms of leadership, which is basically the ability to create trust. If people don't trust you as a leader, you are dead. You are no leader if people don't trust you, right? And trust is something that I'm probably going to base my next talk on. But for the moment, the things I know about trust is that you need to walk the talk, which means whatever you say, you do. Okay? And the other thing about trust is that you need to be true. Okay? You need to be true, and well, okay, I think you've got the idea, and I think we're also running out of time, right? Okay, oh, big budget. So, confused, happy, interested, bored, feedback. I need feedback. How's it going? No, I'm not done. I'm not done. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. I'm not done. I have 2 minutes more. No, I'm serious. I have a couple of things I want to talk about. But I'd like any feedback. Can you recognize yourself in any of the domains? If you think about the domains that I presented, now, do you have a map that you can use to make better decisions in the future? Do you think you have something more? Yes, no? Good. Okay, that was a whole. Okay, still, what I'd really like to point out is that in Agile, then again, I loved the keynote we had here on stage in the morning. I loved it. It was very good food for thought. But then again, we are IT people that are trying to do Agile. So we need a specific kind of leadership. Okay? So and I do believe, as you can see out there, that leadership is based on system awareness, not only process, biological, organic system awareness, individual awareness, and an egoless attitude to what you do. This is another paradox, right? One paradox is that you cannot organize self-organization. The other paradox is, as a leader, you have to be there and not there at the same time. Okay? Be there and not be there at the same time. Okay? Do what you do as a leader as you were not a leader. Okay? And that's probably more effective. So now I'm done, and if you want to talk, I'll be around until 3:30, more or less. This is my contact information. These are what they call courtesy URLs, so just please note the .io in the domain name. Slides are on SlideShare. Connect with me on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, and we can talk later. Thank you very much.